So, as long as y'all are all in the right place, talk about the Habitat program, we'll get started. Next slide. Hold on just a minute. Okay, so a little bit about what we do. First of all, how many of y'all have heard one of these speeches before, come to an informational session before? Just so I have an idea. Okay, perfect. So most of you have not. So Bryan College Station Habitat for Humanity, we're a nonprofit organization. We've been around since 1989, and our focus is on building affordable homes for low-income families. And our principle is kind of that we provide not a handout, but a hand up. We invite people from all faiths, walks of life, whether you're a believer or not, whatever religion you may hold. But we are a Christian-based nonprofit. That's where we came from, this idea that love your neighbor as yourself. That's kind of our focus. And so if you don't mind, we're going to go ahead and open it up with a prayer, just real quick. Lord Jesus, we thank you for bringing all of these folks here today. We pray that they learn what you want them to, and that for some of those that you've called to have a house, that you make the process go really smoothly and make everything work out for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, next slide. Okay. So we sell, currently our model is 3 to 5 bedroom homes. And we have 30-year mortgages on those homes. So essentially what you pay back over 30 years, and the kicker is there is no interest. That's really ultimately the benefit to the Habitat program, because we raise donated funds. We're able to do that and make the mortgages quite a bit cheaper than anything you would find on the regular mortgage market. Right now, our mortgage prices, including taxes and insurance and anything like that, are about $550 and up. So compared to what you would typically see on the market, maybe $800 to $1,200 a month. Sometimes you can get it for $700. We do it for substantially cheaper than that, and it's the interest component that we don't have. So you pay it back over 30 years, interest-free, and you own your house, just like Ms. Thurman that I mentioned earlier. And the cool thing about it is it's kind of cyclical. So those that are approved for a home, they're making their payments over 30 years, and those payments go into the system and help us to be able to continue offering the program for the rest of you and folks in the future that need a home. Next slide. Okay, just as a comparison with the interest component, interest rates have gone down a little bit since we made this slide. But it just gives you an idea of how much you're saving by coming to Habitat rather than to a bank. And in this scenario, over 30 years, with a 4.33% interest rate, you'd be paying out of a $100,000 loan, you'd be paying $78,000 in interest for a total of $170, almost $9,000. Versus with Habitat, $100,000, $100,000. That's kind of how it works. Next slide. All right, so we built 305 homes so far in Bryan and College Station, and we've actually built one home outside of the city limits. We currently serve all of Brazos County, including rural areas. Next slide. Is it moving slow? That's all right. Okay, so 3 main things that we look at for our program. Need, you have to have a need, which we'll talk about in more depth. You have to have the ability to pay, which is the ability to repay rule is fundamental to the entire banking industry, whether you're a nonprofit organization like us or whether you're a lender at a for-profit bank. You have to be able to repay your loan. And then finally, willingness to partner, that's the final key. We do ask quite a bit from what we call our partner families, those that are approved into our program to be able to buy a house and then repay that loan. We'll talk about that a little bit more as well. And then finally, we have down there a residency requirement. We do require that We don't currently accept families that say are living and working in Houston right now. This is a program that is primarily for Brazos County residents, so we want to see residency or work within Brazos County over the last year. So if you live in Burleson County, that's not the end of the world, or a different county, but you work at College Station, ISD, something like that, that typically would work. Just wanted to make that clear. Next slide. So need is really looking at what's the condition of your house, your dwelling. We look at inadequate conditions like structural, plumbing, all of that. Able to meet, property codes. We've had people apply to us before that are like, hey, the city is sending us notices. Our house is in such bad condition that, they're wanting to tear it down. So that would be an example of a need. In addition, we also look at things like overcrowding. So we have kind of a metric that says what overcrowding is. So we look at the number of people in the home. You saw the form we were asking you to fill out as we were kind of looking at that as who's in an overcrowded situation. So if you have a bunch of people in one room, that could be considered a need. And again, you have to have one of these needs. You don't have to be in really bad housing and then also be overcrowded, and also another one is unaffordable housing. You just need to have one. And then the final one that we don't see as many of, but we have seen it before, is if you're unable to acquire a conventional loan. So that means you have tried your best and there's some component that is keeping you from being able to access a loan through a bank. Typically what that would be is too short of a credit history for a bank, but we look at credit a little differently. So things like that. We still look at credit, which we'll talk about, but how we do it is a little different. Next slide. All right, so ability to pay is just what it says. You're able to actually prove that you can repay what we're loaning you, because it is a loan program at the end of the day. Like said before, it's a hand up, not a handout. And so we don't give these homes away. We get a lot of questions about that. You guys give houses away. No, we don't. They work for and pay off their homes just like anybody else. So we need to see a responsible payment history on the credit report. We need to see, just showing that you're making your payments on your other debts. Things like monthly payment includes principal. Oh, this is just the point about how the payments, again, are not just the principal, which is the loan amount, but it's also the escrow, which is taxes and insurance. Just a warning to y'all, our process from the point of where you are right now until we get to the point of you getting the keys to your home is fairly long by conventional mortgage standards. So it can be 2, sometimes 3 years, depending on what's going on with the land situation, what's going on with you being able to complete your hours, which we'll talk about in a minute. But just kind of a warning that because it's such a long process, we may have to pull your credit a couple of times. And we try to do a soft pull as much as we can, but we need to see that in order to be able to show at the very beginning at the application that look at your credit, and then before we build the house, we typically pull it again. So keep that in mind. Let's see, I've mentioned that. And then another thing to mention is that the current income that you have, whether it's a typical job or some other income, we need to see that consistently for the last year. Okay? Next slide. This is our income range chart. Okay? So part of the need is not just what I mentioned before, but it's also household income. Now, we don't want to scare you away if you look at this chart and you're like, I'm on one end or the other and I don't fit in here. I feel like I have too low of income or too high. We do still encourage you to apply, because I have seen people who think that they're too low or too high and still are able to get approved. But this is generally, it's based on just a range that we have, and it starts at the lower end. That 24,000 is what is expected to be able to afford a single family standalone house here in Bryan or College Station. And then on the upper end, you know, the 38 or 40 for one person, for example, is basically, you know, maybe you could go and get a loan from a bank instead. Maybe you have enough income for that. So this is kind of the range that we do. Unfortunately, it goes up every year because house prices are going up so high. Any questions on that? No? Next slide. The ability to partner, thing that we talked about earlier. Partnership, BCS Habitat does partner with a variety of different groups. Our partnership is volunteer labor. We also get gift in kind or donated funds. And we're able to continue serving families because we have this kind of broad partnership. Next slide. The willingness to partner is crucial for that because when we're soliciting, we're asking for donations. We're saying, okay, we have this family over here that really needs a house. Here they are. We'd like to introduce you. We need to be able to work with the approved family to help with that fundraising opportunity. Because at the end of the day, we need to raise enough funds to be able to buy the materials to start the house, which is really how that goes. So one of the things with willingness to partner is your sweat equity hours. And what that is typically, I mentioned about the interest before, that you get a significant deduction because there is no interest. What we ask our families to do in return is to help build the house. That's essentially what it is. And it's a certain number of hours that we ask the applicant and co-applicant, and then anyone over a certain age that's going to be living in the household. And so that equals to the amount that Delia will tell you. I think it's depends on the family size these days, but I believe it's $250 per applicant. Those are the number of hours that we ask for. So it's not an insignificant investment, basically, for y'all. The sweat equity is completed by working hours at not just the Habitat office, but also the Habitat resale shop, the Restore, and then, like I said, building your own home. Can you do next slide? I already mentioned a lot of this, so I'm not going to go back into it. But just keep in mind that you could, from this point, you know, you're looking at a couple of years. You know, we're hoping that in the next year or two we will be able to speed up this process, but it's been very difficult for us to acquire land in Bryan and College Station. It used to be Bryan was fairly easy for us, but with house prices going where they are and the real estate market is very, very difficult. Yes, sir.
If you have your own land?
Yes, and we'll talk about that at the end, but we have, it's part of the same program, but if you own your own land outright, we will definitely talk to you about that. Yeah, we'll talk more about it in a little bit. And I forgot to mention that if you have individual questions that maybe you don't want to bring up in the group, myself and Delia, maybe Mario, will be able to answer some questions at the end. So keep that in mind, but you are also welcome to ask a question like that if you'd like to. Yes, if you have your own land, that's great. It may speed up the process. It may also make your home a little more affordable for you because you're coming to the table with the land, okay? But we'll talk a little bit more about that. Next slide. So the phases of building the home. The first is where you're at right now. Hopefully some of you will apply for our program. Then if you are approved, there are these workshop classes, really financial literacy and pre-home ownership classes. Those are the two areas we teach. You need to, during this phase, to hopefully complete about half of the sweat equity hours that you're asked to do. You choose a lot. You pay your $1,000 deposit. It's not a application, you know, it's not like something associated with the loan or the application. It's basically a prepayment on your taxes and your insurance. But we do ask you to come up with $1,000 by the time we start building your home in order for you to be able to show that, you know, there's a track record of being able to save. But really at the end of the day, it's setting you up for success, because if you've got that nest egg in your escrow account, your taxes and insurance, you're going to be that much farther ahead in your payments. So it's not something that we're just taking and using for something. It's yours. But that's what that is. Um, and then we may have to do, typically we have to do a second income credit and background check. Okay. Next slide. The second phase is the construction phase, when you also complete the rest of your sweat equity hours. And then we typically do a third, if necessary, a third check of credit, income, that sort of thing. Next slide. Then finally, it's just buying your home. You know, signing all the disclosures, going to your closing and your dedication, and now it's your home. Next slide. Okay, so a little bit about actually completing the application. Delia may need to jump in here a little bit because I don't really do the application as much. But completing the application, a couple of things to keep in mind, the applicant and co-applicant. You do need to make sure that you're both planning to live in that home. I mean, that's the whole point of our program, is to help families that really need a home. So you can't, an example would be you can't get your mom who's living in Houston to essentially co-sign on there. Another thing to keep in mind, you need to be a citizen or a legal resident. Both of those, according to federal law, you can buy a home, okay? Then also you need to obviously complete the application, and I already mentioned the residency requirement of at least 1 year. Next slide. Some things you need to bring with you or you need to make sure are a part of your completed application. Birth certificates, social security cards. We also have driver's license or ID, landlord reference form, and we need 2 years of rental history. Is that, Delia, is that consecutive 2 years, like the last 2 years? Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So we need at least the last 2 years of rental history. Need to make sure, she can help you a little more with this, but they need to be in a sealed envelope or faxed to us from the landlord. If you have a lease, that's great. We want to see that too. Next slide. We also need employment verification. Now, if any of you are getting income from a different source other than a employer, say if you have retirement, Social Security, something like that, we'll talk about that as well. But with the employment verification, we're looking for last 3 years of work history, or as I said, if it's SSI, something like that, it's last 3 years of income history. We will need a verification of employment in a sealed envelope as well. So both of those two things need to be a sealed envelope or faxed to us. I'm right about that, right? They can fax it to us. We need last 2 years of W-2s if you're in an employment situation, as well as income tax returns, again, if you're in that situation. We need, I mentioned SSI, Social Security. We need those award letters then. And then if you intend to use child support as a part of your income, if you intend to do that, and you're not required to do that, by the way, but if you decide to do that, you need to provide us the last 12 months of statements, okay? Because a lot of times the office over there will provide the last 12 payments, and so you need to be careful of that. Okay, next slide. Additionally, if this fits you, marriage certificate or divorce decree. We need to look at last 2 months of bank statements, and then also monthly bills and payments, which our application has a list of what those could be. It includes all the bills and expenses that you list on the application. This is important. It's whatever you put on the application, make sure it matches. You can prove it. You know, it's common sense, but you know, if you say that you make this much, you know, make sure that you get that as close as you can to it. If you say you have a car payment, make sure we get to see a statement on that car payment, okay? Any questions so far? All right, next slide. Okay, finally, in submitting your application, these are the dates that we want to talk about. So you can start turning in, or we'll be accepting your application starting on Monday. I believe that's Monday the 3rd, right? Oh, so, so what's the 3rd? Did we mean the 2nd? Uh-oh, so we have a typo here. Okay, Monday the 2nd, thank you. Um, so it's actually the 2nd, and it goes through the 31st of August, okay? So you can turn those in at any time during that time period. And we do want to have a kind of sit-down appointment with you to go over your application. So that's where you do need to make an appointment with Delia to be able to do that by calling this number up here. But it's also, if you have an application, it's also in there as well. You do need to call to make an appointment. We're hoping that you'll decide whether or not you want to apply and have an appointment with Delia by the 23rd of August, because that provides enough time for Delia to do what she needs to do and to schedule everything. So please, by the 23rd, make sure that you have called to make an appointment with Delia. And make sure that you bring everything on that list. There's a pretty awesome checklist in there that Delia and her predecessor put together that I think is hopefully pretty clear as far as what things are needed. Final point, the one thing that we require as far as money for applying with us, it's not an application fee. Those are illegal. This is a credit check pull. So it actually costs us money to pull the credit. And so it costs us about $25, a little bit more, to pull your credit. And so that's all that is we'll have to pull credit for every person who's listed as an applicant. So if you have a co-applicant, we need to have $50 in a money order. Do we take anything else other than a money order? Just a money order, right? Personal. Or personal checks, okay. But 25 per applicant. Next slide. And then the process as far as how you would get approved is know that we're reviewing your ability to pay, and that we will notify you if you meet the ability to pay criteria. So really looking at that first. Do you have enough income and enough balance in your credit ratio to be able to afford the loan? But if that happens, then we're going to start looking at what the need is. And so we'll do a home visit. If you said, okay, I have really bad dilapidated housing, we send some volunteers out there to meet with you, talk to you, and assess the housing need there. If it's overcrowding, same thing. If it's any number of the needs we talked about before. Then after that, we have a homebuyer selection committee that reviews every application that's gotten to this point, and it's a bunch of volunteers. Some of them have been with us for quite a while, and they are just helping staff as kind of a check to make sure that we are following our procedures, that we're considering every aspect. And so we kind of have a balance there where they advise Delia really on the applications to that point. But then after that, should the committee approve the application or recommend approval, it goes to our board of directors that will triple check it, and they will vote on it, and they're the ones that make that decision. So what we wanted to let you know, though, is that within 30 days of your application being submitted, like finally, like getting everything turned in, within 30 days, you'll receive a call or a letter from us saying either yes, no, or needing more information, additional information. Keep in mind, if you get that question of we need additional information, that's probably a good thing. That's not a bad thing, okay? So sometimes it can take more than 30 days, depending on the circumstance, but we try to get back to you as soon as we possibly can with a yes, no. Next slide. Okay, owning your own land. This is how we do it. We've been doing this for a couple of years now. If you own a lot within the city or even outside the city, I believe we've done this once so far. So it's a fairly new program. We built a home on an acre of land outside of the city limits. Never done that before, but it came off really well. We do want to talk to you about that because, as I said before, it's getting harder and harder for us to acquire land, and it's becoming more and more expensive. So if you have land, even if it has a dilapidated trailer on it, or it's covered in woods or whatever, we want to talk to you about it because it could very well be that it's something that could be buildable. and could be something good for you as well. So if you do, please let us know. Make sure you put that on the application. You go through the same process we just described. Only difference is, one, the land has to be within Brazos County. The land needs to be owned 100% by the applicant, so whoever's listed on that application, okay? If you do have some title issues, let us know, and we may look at that and see how difficult those are. But we really want to see it in the applicant's name, clear title. We want to know as well as we can that the land is buildable, and we do it kind of in stages. First, we look at the title. Then, if that passes and everything, then we'll help you look at, is this in a place where the numbers make sense? Because there are times where somebody owns land, but it would be so expensive for you to build a house on that it doesn't make sense. So it's a little different than if you don't own land, but we're definitely wanting to work with you. Just keep in mind that we do ask for you to get your own title search, which is usually about $200. And we need to see a recent one. That's the thing. So it can't be a title search from 20 years ago or 10 years ago. And so that's an extra expense that we hadn't talked about here. But if you have all those things and you submit it and you own the land, yeah, we'll talk to you about how to do that. And we can answer any other questions. And then finally, you have to have a deed or something showing you own the land. And I think that's the end of our presentation, where we can open it up to group questions. And then finally, we can do individual one-on-one questions if you'd rather do it that way. Do you have anything to add, Delia?
I'm just really excited that you're all here. Like Charlie said, we are looking forward for everyone to hopefully apply that is here. And if you have any personal questions, you're more than welcome to give me a call. More than happy to answer those.
Yeah. Yeah. So who has questions? Mario, are there any questions online?
So far,
No?
I think we're good.
All right.
How many homes do y'all build within a community at a time?
Sorry, say that again.
How many homes do you guys build within a community at a time?
Like within a subdivision? Okay. It depends. We have some that are as few as 15 or 20, all the way up to the biggest one we've done is like 98 homes, something like that. So as far as developers go, we're probably middle of the road when it comes to that. Our biggest one is over on West 28th Street currently, and it's 90-something homes. I forget exactly what. But keep in mind, that's a good question, because we don't just build subdivisions or communities. We also build what we call infill. When we can find land that is within an existing neighborhood, we will do that as well. In fact, for the last 3 years or so, we've mainly been doing infill rather than a subdivision. We're hoping to get going on some more subdivisions again, but keep in mind that we do both. And hopefully some of you, if you are approved, it's possible you may have that choice, you know. I mean, they have pluses and minuses too.
Families that you were
Yeah, good question. We do not have a quota currently, so we don't come into the application session, like for now we're in August, and say we will approve 3 families. We don't do that. We actually try to approve anyone who's qualified. But what we've seen over the years is typically we end up with about somewhere between 2 and 6, you know, something like that is usually how it ends up, because of all the things I listed earlier, you know, where it's a lot of requirements and that sort of thing. But no, we don't. I mean, if you meet all the qualifications, we do it. One thing I did want to make sure y'all are aware of is, you know, we've had application periods in the last couple of years with other folks that are getting approved. And typically we have a line of about 10 families. So keep that in mind. So 10 families equals about a year of home building, okay? So where y'all are at right now, you know, I mentioned the up to 3 years. Keep in mind that you do have about a year's worth of families needing homes ahead of you. So I'm not trying to scare anybody away. I just wanted to be realistic with that that's typically what we have, okay? Yes?
inside and stuff? How we doing it?
That's another good question. Yeah, that's another good question. We are not a builder that does a lot of customization or allows that. And I'll tell you why. It's because we try to build a product that is the sturdiest and most energy efficient product you can have, while also the most affordable. So our homes tend to appraise for quite a bit less, the home itself, not the land, quite a bit less. It's not a negative thing, but a little bit under what a for-profit builder would be. And that's because we have a certain way of building where we allow a certain amount of customization, but what we're not going to do is say that you can put your bedroom over here, over there, that kind of thing. It has more to do with so the paints, colors, and the fixtures and things like that. Excuse me?
Like if you want a wood flooring or a pool or something?
No, we don't do pools. No.
Pay it in my pocket.
That would be something that you would do after the fact. It wouldn't be something that we would finance, because we build decent, affordable homes that last a long time, that give you the lowest possible mortgage payment you can have. And then if you want to do a pool later, go for it. But that's just not in our model. Did somebody else have a question? Or as far as customization? Typically it is the bathtubs that we're lucky enough to get from Gift in Kind. So we have relationships with certain companies. I can't tell you who they are, but it's not like like the fanciest in the world. They're good ones that last. It's like what you would get at Lowe's, that kind of thing. But no, that's a good point, that you do need to keep in mind that I want to make sure your expectations are where they are, where the customization we allow is, like, we'll even tell you, okay, your family size is this, so we can build you a 3-bedroom, or we can build you a 4-bedroom. That's kind of what we do. So typically you don't have the option to say, well, I'd like to buy a 5-bedroom, even though I only need a 3. You'll have that option to add on in the future if you're able to do that, but that's not our model. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
So let's say you said it's a 30-year.
That's correct.
So let's say if I paid off my home and I'm in year 20, and something happens to me and I pass away, and I have children.
Mm-hmm.
How can I guarantee that home's going to go to my kids?
Well, the best way is a will. And we actually, in our workshop classes that we require those who get approved to this program to take, one of them is on making sure that you get a will, and we're always actively looking for attorneys that can provide affordable or free wills. But yeah, the best way to do it is a will. Now, the question about the loan, were you saying that your loan was still active or you had paid it off?
No, it's still active.
If it's still active, our process is we look at, okay, who's the heir and can they still afford it? We have never kicked out someone out of their home. We try to work with them if, God forbid, the homeowner passes away. So we're a lot more lenient than what some lenders can do. I'm not trying to pick on the banks, but it's not like you pass away and then you're kicked out. I've been working with this one case that's really tricky, where the homeowner, single mother, passed away, and the oldest child was 18 at the time. So he went and got a job, and we haven't kicked him out yet. But the thing is that it's half owned by, at that time, a 12-year-old, because that's kind of the way the heirship worked. And so we've just been working with the oldest, and you keep making your payments and working on this, and when your younger brother turns 18, we will figure that out. Now, we don't want y'all to get into that situation because it's a mess. Please just do a will. That would be much better.
Excuse me,
Yes, ma'am.
how much is the payment for work? Is it expensive?
Excuse me?
How much is the payment for work? Is it expensive?
For the mortgage, it's typically, I think we had on here $550 and up. I like to tell people about $600 a month, okay? Which that's probably, it could be on the higher end, but we've seen between, say, $550 and $650, depending on the size of your house, because it's going to appraise more. Because keep in mind that part of your payment, that $600 I mentioned, is property taxes, which are going up and up and up every year. So we try to predict that as much as we can. Just a second. Has anybody else got a question? I want to make sure I hit everybody. Yes, sir.
If you pay more than the payment, is that considered?
That's perfect. That's perfect. If you can pay more, do it. We always encourage it.
Would that make it more than less than 30 years?
Yeah, of course.
If you pay this way?
Yeah, of course. So Miss Thurman may have had, I can't remember if she had a 30-year or not, but she paid it off earlier just by doing that. And so we have a lot of families who are like, look, I don't want to do a 30-year mortgage, but we give them that anyways so that God, you know, if something happens and they get sick or something, they have that flexibility. But we got a lot of families who are like, I want a 20-year, so I'm going to pay like it's a 20-year and pay it off in 20 years. And there's no penalty, anything like that. You can do whatever you want with that. Okay? Any other questions? If not, Delia, if anybody wants an application, Delia and Ms. Thurman have some more. If you want to talk to myself, Delia, one-on-one, we're happy to do that. We have about 15 minutes until the next class comes in. So just let us know. Well, thank y'all.